The first thing I want to talk about is how we can actually execute a Node program, because there are a few ways. In fact, there's several ways, but we're really only going to talk about the important ones. So the first one is called the Node REPL, and REPL stands for Read, Evaluate, Print, Loop. It's basically an interactive shell that's going to be in the execution context or the runtime of your choice. In this case, it's going to be Node. So we'll have an interactive shell inside of our terminal where we can just write some JavaScript in the Node runtime. Very similar to where if you open up the console in a browser like this, and you were able to interact. This is a REPL, right? So I can come in here and I can do stuff like this, right? So we're gonna do the same thing, but outside of the browser using Node.js. And the way that you can do that is if you just go to your terminal. I need to open up mine. There we go. Here's my terminal. I'm actually going to go over to my folder. Am I here? Oh, I'm already in here. Okay, so I'm gonna make this bigger. And what you can do is you can just run the Node. First of all, just to double check you have Node installed, I recommend running which Node if you're on Mac. And it's going to point to where you have Node installed. You can see that I used NVM, so it's installed in this NVM folder. If you installed it from the actual Node source, you might see something like user bin if you're on Mac, and you'll see it installed there. On Windows, I have no idea what it's going to say when you installed it, but just make sure that you have it. You can also just type in Node version and see what version of Node you have, just to make sure it's there. If you're getting an error when you type in the Node command, then it means it's not installed properly. So go back and follow those instructions. So once you do have it installed and we want to execute on that REPL, or we want to turn it on, you can just type in Node with no arguments, and you should see something like this. Welcome to Node.js, followed by the version that you're on, and then you can do something like called type help for information. But now we're in this prompt here, and it's pretty much a console just like I showed you in the browser. So if I wanted to make a variable like this, you can see I have it, and then I could actually just type it in, and before I even hit enter to execute this, it's giving me that autocomplete, like, oh, there's the value of that variable. So as you can see, this is a great place to prototype different things, try out different features in JavaScript. I like to use the REPL when I'm doing something quick. I've even gotten to the point where like I'll use the REPL for a calculator versus opening up the calculator app on my computer, because it's just faster just to go on a terminal and type in Node and do math than it is to like go on a calculator and click things. So I use it for a bunch of random stuff all the time. But you probably won't be using the Node REPL to build any applications, as you can tell. I mean, this isn't source code. This code isn't being written to a file anywhere. You can't check it into Git or GitHub. So yeah, you probably couldn't build an application in a REPL, although I'm sure if you were to go search the internet, someone's probably done this before. But that's probably not going to be you, and I do not recommend trying to build an app in the REPL. It's just a playground to get some stuff going. And then to exit the REPL, at least on the Mac, I can hit Control-C, or there we go, press it again, and it will exit for you. I think you can also just type in exit maybe. Let's see if that works. Nope, exit does not work. That's some other REPL. I get all these REPLs mixed up. So yeah, I just hit Control-C to exit that, and that way I'm not inside of that REPL anymore, and now I'm back inside of my terminal environment here. So like I said, you don't want to be running a program inside the Node REPL for all the reasons that I stated. So the real way you want to do it is you want to put your code in the file, just like you've done your whole life, your whole coding career, and we want to execute that file against the Node runtime. And this is where it really gets interesting, because you're going to find out that your VS Code or whatever text editor you're using doesn't really know what context your JavaScript file is going to be executed in. Is it going to be executed in the browser? Is it going to be executed on Node? Maybe it's executed on a mobile device, because JavaScript is basically universal. It can be executed in many different runtimes. So this is where it's very helpful for you to understand when your JavaScript code is going to be executed and what environment it's going to be in, because that's going to determine what features you have access to and what you're able to do inside of that code. So let's start with actually creating a file, and then let's try to execute that file with the Node runtime. So just make a new folder on your computer. I already have one here. It's just a blank folder. I'm going to open it in VS Code. There's nothing in it. And I am going to I'm just going to make a file here inside of this folder. I'm going to call it index.js. And then what I'm going to do is, let's try to do something we would normally do in the browser. I'm actually just going to do an alert here. And I'm going to say hello. Right? This would totally work in the browser. We know if we went to the browser right now and we typed in alert, this definitely works. Right? And like I said, Node.js is JavaScript. So if alert works in the browser and that's JavaScript, then alert should also work in Node.js because that too is JavaScript. So let's give it a try. So I'm going to go to the terminal, or I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to my editor, type in alert, go back to my terminal, and then to execute this file in the Node.js runtime, I just type in node, just like we did with the REPL, followed by the path to that file. So I'm already inside of my files directory here, so it's going to be relative, and that's just going to be index.js. And then I can type and I hit enter. And immediately I get an error here. So you can see that I get this thing called reference error, alert is not defined. And these are the differences that I'm talking about. This is why it's very important to understand where you're going to be executing your JavaScript code, because the same JavaScript could work differently depending on the environment that you're in. I could take this same file and add it to a script tag in a browser app and it would work totally fine. I mean, you probably shouldn't have an alert on your site unless you want people to go, running away screaming because it looks like spam, but it will work, right? But it's not going to work here in Node because there is no alert. Node doesn't have a user interface. There's nothing visual to Node. It's running on your operating system in the background. There is no CSS. There is no DOM. There is nothing visual about Node.js. It's a OS level language. So we don't have access to something like alert. And even if we did, what would you expect it to do? Would you expect to see a notification pop up on your computer? Because actually that would be pretty dope and someone should make that if they haven't already. But no, it doesn't do that. So these are some of the differences that we're going to discover. So let's actually do something that we can do in Node that does also work in the browser. And it's going to be our favorite friend, console.log, right? Console.log is pretty much my, I can't live without console.log. So I don't know how much y'all use console.log, but I cannot live without it. It's basically how I debug everything. I have solved many crises with console.log. So let's try to see if it works here in Node.js. And you can see we do get that message, hello. So the console.log works just fine here. So this is where it gets tricky. It's like, well, what works in the browser and what doesn't work in the browser? What works in Node and what doesn't work in Node? The answer is, it depends. If it's usually something with UI facing, anything with the DOM, anything like that, like querying a DOM, elements, things like that, it's not going to work in Node because there is nothing there. And then on the flip side, if there's usually something to do with like file system or any OS level things like networking, it's probably not going to work in the browser. So I can tell you right now, I don't think anyone remembers all the different things that work. It's more about just, you do this enough, you do a lot of trial and error, you understand what each environment has access to, and you can figure it out from there. Besides, the computer would tell you when you're wrong, so you don't have to guess. It'll literally just, as you saw, will tell you if this doesn't work here, and that's when you'll know.